The rain hammered Chicago's south side like bullets against concrete. Malcolm Cross stood in the loading dock behind his restaurant, watching his enforcers drag a body wrapped in plastic toward the incinerator, when something touched his wrist. Not a blade. Not a gun. A crumpled $5 bill. He looked down. A black woman in scrubs stood there, mud splattered on her white sneakers, blood under her fingernails, hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. Her hand shook as she held up that money like it was a winning lottery ticket. Her eyes were wide, pupils blown, chest heaving like she'd just run a marathon. "Please," she said. Her voice cracked. "Hide me." Malcolm's men moved fast. Hands went to waistbands. Shoulders squared. But Malcolm raised one finger and they froze mid-reach. He'd been running Korean operations in Chicago for 12 years. People didn't walk up to him. They crossed streets. They found urgent business elsewhere. They definitely didn't offer him lunch money. He took the $5. Studied it. The bill was soft, worn at the edges, folded and refolded so many times the creases had turned white. Someone's emergency fund. Someone's last resort. "You lost?" Malcolm asked. "No." She glanced over her shoulder at the alley entrance. Rain poured down her face, mixing with what might have been tears. "I'm exactly where I need to be." That's when he noticed her hands. Scrubs were standard nurse green, but her knuckles were split open, fresh. Her left cheek had a bruise blooming purple beneath brown skin. And her right pocket had a dark stain that looked too much like blood. Malcolm had seen enough violence to recognize the aftermath. This woman had been in a fight. And from the look of her, she'd won. "What's your name?" "Claudia." She swallowed hard. Water dripped from her chin. "Claudia Mitchell. Claudia Mitchell." Malcolm repeated it slowly, letting each syllable hang in the wet air. His men shifted behind him, waiting for orders. The body in plastic could wait. This was more interesting. "You know who I am?" "Yes." "You know what I do?" "Yes." "Then you know I don't hide people for $5. Her face crumpled for just a second. Then she straightened up, lifted her chin. Malcolm noticed her jawline, strong and defiant even while the rest of her shook. "It's all I have on me right now. But I'm good for the rest. I can work. I can cook. I can clean. I'm a registered nurse, so if anyone gets hurt I can stitch them up, no questions asked." Malcolm's second in command, a man named Leo with a scar running down his jaw, stepped forward. "Boss, we got business. We need to move." Malcolm ignored him. Something about this woman kept his attention locked. Maybe it was the way she stood there, soaked and terrified but refusing to back down. Maybe it was the blood on her scrubs that she hadn't bothered to explain yet. Or maybe it was the fact that she'd chosen him, specifically him, out of everyone in Chicago she could have run to. "Claudia Mitchell. Why are you covered in blood?" "It's not mine." "I can see that." "Whose is it?" She looked at the $5 in his hand. Her bottom lip trembled. Water ran down her neck, disappearing into her scrubs. "If I tell you, you won't help me. Try me." Claudia took a breath so deep her whole body shook. "Detective Raymond Foster's." The loading dock went silent. Even the rain seemed to pause. Malcolm felt something cold settle in his stomach. Raymond Foster was a Chicago PD detective. Dirty as they came, on 3 different payrolls, but still a cop. And dead cops brought heat nobody wanted. "You kill a cop?" Malcolm asked quietly. "I defended myself." "That's not what I asked." "Yes." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I killed him." If you're enjoying this story, hit that subscribe button now for more like this. You don't want to miss out. Leo pulled his weapon halfway out. Two other men flanked the alley exit. Malcolm held up his hand again and they stopped. He studied Claudia Mitchell, this woman in bloody scrubs holding $5 like it was a weapon, and tried to figure out what kind of person walked up to a Korean mob boss and confessed to killing a detective. The smart move would be to eliminate her. Clean problem. But Malcolm found himself curious. Found himself wanting to know why someone so clearly intelligent would make such a monumentally stupid decision. Why? Malcolm asked. Because he was going to kill me first. Why would a cop want to kill a nurse? Claudia's laugh came out broken, sharp. Because I found out what he was doing. What they were all doing. Malcolm tilted his head. Rain ran down his own face now, cold against his skin. They? The precinct. The whole 5th District. Detective Foster, his partner, their captain. All of them. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, smearing dirt across her cheek. They've been running girls out of that old factory on Ashland Avenue. 17, 18 years old. Mostly immigrants. Girls who won't be missed. Malcolm felt his jaw tighten. He ran operations in this city. Protection, gambling, some light extortion. But trafficking was a line he didn't cross. It brought too much attention, too much risk, and it violated the one rule his father had beaten into him as a kid. You don't touch kids. You don't touch women who can't fight back. How do you know this? Malcolm asked. Because one of them came into my ER 3 nights ago. Claudia's voice got quieter. 15 years old. Beaten so badly I couldn't recognize her face. She kept saying a name. Detective Foster. Over and over. Detective Foster did this. Detective Foster brought me here. You report it? To who? Claudia's eyes flashed, and Malcolm saw fire beneath the fear. The police? I tried. I went straight to internal affairs. Filled out the forms. Gave my statement. 24 hours later, Detective Foster showed up at my apartment. Malcolm watched her hands curl into fists. The split knuckles started bleeding again, small drops hitting the wet concrete. He told me I made a mistake, Claudia continued. Said I misunderstood what the girl meant. Said trauma victims get confused. Then he grabbed my throat and told me if I opened my mouth again, he'd make sure I disappeared just like those other girls. So you killed him. So I fought back. Claudia's voice hardened. Malcolm noticed the way her shoulders squared, the steel in her spine. He came at me tonight. Followed me after my shift. Cornered me in the hospital parking garage. Had his gun out, ready to put one in my head and call it a robbery. But I had a scalpel in my pocket from work. And I'm very good at knowing where arteries are. Malcolm almost smiled. Almost. This woman had more nerve than half his crew. How long ago? 2 hours. Maybe less. I've been running since. They'll have your name by now. I know. They'll have your face on every screen in the city. I know that too. So why come to me? Malcolm asked. Why not run? Canada's 4 hours north. Mexico's a flight away. Why walk into a mob loading dock and offer me $5? Claudia looked him straight in the eye. Malcolm felt something shift in his chest. Her eyes were brown, deep and honest despite everything she'd just confessed. Because running means they win. Running means those girls keep disappearing and nobody does anything about it. And I'm tired of nobody doing anything. Malcolm studied her. This woman who just killed a cop, who was covered in his blood, who should be terrified out of her mind. But instead she stood there in the rain looking at him like he was her last hope. Like $5 and a confession could buy her salvation. You're insane, Malcolm said. Probably. You know I could just kill you right now. Throw you in with whatever's left of Detective Foster. Clean problem. You could. Claudia didn't blink. But you won't. What makes you so sure? Because Mrs. Hernandez at the bodega on 43rd Street says you have rules. She says you don't hurt women. You don't hurt kids. And you hate dirty cops more than anything. Malcolm felt something twist in his chest. Mrs. Hernandez had been paying him protection money for 8 years. He'd never thought of it as protection before. Just business. Just the way things worked. But apparently she'd been telling people he was some kind of hero. Mrs. Hernandez talks too much, Malcolm muttered. She saved my life. She sent you to your death. Not yet, she didn't. Claudia stepped closer. Close enough that Malcolm could smell the hospital on her. Antiseptic and fear and something metallic. Close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her brown eyes, the way her pulse hammered in her throat. Look, I know what this is. I know what you do. But I also know you've been operating in this neighborhood for over a decade and nobody's gotten hurt who didn't deserve it. You run clean operations. You keep the real monsters out. And right now, I need someone who knows how to deal with monsters. Leo cleared his throat. Boss, this is a bad idea. I know, Malcolm said. He couldn't look away from Claudia's face. Cops will tear this place apart looking for her. I know that too. We can't hide a cop killer. That's suicide. Malcolm looked at the $5 bill in his hand. Then at Claudia Mitchell, this nurse who'd walked through hell to stand in his loading dock and ask for help. She could have run. Should have run. But instead she'd chosen to fight. Chosen to trust him with a confession that could get them both killed. Tell me about the factory, Malcolm said quietly. Claudia blinked. What? The factory on Ashland where they're keeping the girls. Tell me everything you know. You're going to help me? I'm going to make a very stupid decision. Malcolm pocketed the $5. Leo, get her inside. Clean her up. Burn those scrubs. Find her something that doesn't scream cop killer. Leo stared at him. Boss. Do it. You're starting a war with the Chicago PD over $5 and a dead detective. Malcolm smiled, but there was no warmth in it. No. I'm starting a war with dirty cops who think they can traffic girls in my neighborhood. There's a difference. As Leo led Claudia toward the back entrance, she stopped and turned. Mr. Cross? Malcolm. Malcolm. She swallowed. Something passed between them in that moment, something Malcolm couldn't name. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You're about to learn why people cross the street when they see me coming. Inside, Malcolm's restaurant looked normal. Red leather booths. Chrome fixtures. A bar that served whiskey to old men who didn't ask questions. But through the kitchen, past the walk-in freezer, down a set of stairs that officially didn't exist, was where Malcolm really conducted business. The room was concrete and fluorescent lights. A table covered in weapons. A wall of monitors showing security feeds from half the south side. And sitting around the table were the 8 men who helped Malcolm run his operation. Leo got Claudia situated in a corner with a first aid kit and some clean clothes. She stripped off her bloody scrubs without hesitation, like she'd forgotten modesty was a thing. Malcolm's men looked away. Good. He'd trained them right. But Malcolm found himself watching her longer than he should have. The curve of her shoulders. The way she moved, efficient and careful despite the trauma she'd just been through. He forced himself to look away. Gentlemen, Malcolm said, pulling up a chair. We have a problem. The nurse, said Tommy, Malcolm's tech guy. 22 years old, acne scars, genius with computers. She killed Detective Foster. How do you know that? Tommy spun his laptop around. On the screen was a Chicago PD alert. Claudia's face. Her license. Her address. Her entire life summarized in a single paragraph. Wanted for questioning in the death of Detective Raymond Foster. Considered armed and dangerous. They're not saying murder yet, Tommy said. Just questioning. Which means they don't have enough evidence to make it stick. Or they're trying to keep it quiet, Leo added. Dead cops bad press. Dead dirty cops worse. Malcolm nodded. Claudia, get over here. She walked over, now wearing jeans and a black t-shirt that swallowed her frame. Her hair was still wet, pulled back from her face. Without the blood and fear, Malcolm could see her clearly. Beautiful, in a way that caught him off guard. Strong cheekbones. Full lips. Eyes that held more strength than someone her size should possess. She caught him staring and raised an eyebrow. See something interesting? Just wondering how someone so smart could do something so stupid. Takes one to know one. Tommy snorted. Leo coughed to cover a laugh. Malcolm felt the corner of his mouth twitch. This woman had nerve. Eat, Malcolm said, pushing food toward her. When's the last time you had a meal? Yesterday. Maybe. Eat while you talk. Tell them about the factory. So Claudia told them. Between bites of turkey and Swiss, she laid out everything. The girl who'd come into her ER. The name she'd kept repeating. The investigation Claudia had tried to start. The threats. The corruption that ran so deep you couldn't tell where the police ended and the trafficking operation began. Malcolm watched her talk. Watched the way her hands moved when she explained something. The passion in her voice when she described the girl she'd tried to save. This wasn't just about survival for Claudia. This was personal. This was justice. The factory's been abandoned for 3 years, Claudia said. City shut it down for safety violations. But Foster and his crew have been using it as a staging ground. They bring girls in through the back. Keep them there for a few days. Then move them to buyers around the state. How many girls? Malcolm asked. I don't know. The one I saw was number 17. She had it tattooed on her wrist. Tommy's fingers flew across his keyboard. Ashland Avenue. Old textile factory. Buildings owned by a shell company registered to a law firm downtown. That law firm's tied to 3 city councilmen and 1 very dirty cop. Foster, Malcolm said. Foster, Tommy confirmed. Leo leaned back in his chair. So we're looking at a trafficking ring run by Chicago PD with political protection. That's not a problem, boss. That's a death sentence. Good thing I'm already dead, Claudia said quietly. Everyone looked at her. She set down her sandwich, wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. They're going to say I killed Foster in cold blood. They'll make me look like a monster. They'll bury the trafficking story so deep nobody will ever find it. And those girls will keep disappearing. Not if I have anything to say about it, Malcolm said. Why? Claudia looked at him with genuine confusion. Malcolm felt that look in his chest, warm and uncomfortable. Why would you risk everything for people you don't know? Malcolm thought about that question. Thought about his father, who'd run these same streets 30 years ago with the same rules. Thought about Mrs. Hernandez and her 2 kind words. Thought about the neighborhood he'd been protecting without realizing he was protecting it. Because somebody has to, Malcolm said finally. And it might as well be me. Claudia held his gaze. Something passed between them, electric and unspoken. Malcolm found himself wanting to know more about her. Wanting to understand what made someone risk everything for strangers. He stood up, walked to the weapons table. Picked up his phone and started making calls. By the time he'd finished, 15 men were en route to his restaurant. 15 soldiers who'd followed him through hell before and would do it again. "Tommy," Malcolm said. "I need everything on that factory. Blueprints, security, how many exits. And I need to know who's guarding it." "On it." "Leo, call Marcus Webb. Tell him we need clean transport and fake IDs. 3 of them. Claudia's getting out of Chicago tonight whether she likes it or not." "I'm not running," Claudia said. "You're not dying either," Malcolm shot back. "You did your part. You exposed them. Now let me do mine." "What's your part?" Malcolm smiled. "Burning that factory to the ground and making sure every cop involved goes down with it." The room went quiet. Even Leo, who'd seen Malcolm do terrible things, looked uncertain. "Boss," Leo said carefully. "That's not just a war. That's scorched earth." "Good." Malcolm checked his weapon. "I've been playing nice for too long. Time to remind people why they used to be afraid of me." Claudia stood up. "I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not. Those girls know me. The one I treated, she trusts me. If you go in there guns blazing, they'll be terrified. But if I'm there, if they see a nurse, they might actually believe you're trying to help." Malcolm wanted to argue. Wanted to tell her she was a liability, a target, a complication he didn't need. But looking at her face, at the determination in her eyes, he knew she wouldn't back down. And part of him, a part he didn't want to examine too closely, wanted her there. Wanted to keep her in his sight where he could protect her. "Fine," Malcolm said. "But you do exactly what I say. When I say run, you run. When I say hide, you hide. Understood?" "Understood." "Good." He turned to his men. "We move in 2 hours. Tommy, I want every piece of information you can find. Leo, start spreading the word. I want backup teams on standby in case this goes wrong. And someone get Claudia a vest. If she's coming protected." As everyone scattered to prepare, Claudia walked over to Malcolm. She pulled the $5 bill from his pocket, looked at it, then tucked it back. Her fingers brushed his and Malcolm felt electricity shoot up his arm. "Keep it," she said. "For luck." "I don't believe in luck." "Then believe in this." She met his eyes. Malcolm saw gold flecks in the brown, saw strength and fear and something else he couldn't name. "You're doing the right thing. The right thing usually gets you killed. Better than dying for the wrong one." Malcolm almost laughed. This woman had killed a cop, confessed to a mob boss, and was now preparing to walk into a trafficking den with criminals as her only backup. And somehow she thought she was on the right side of things. Maybe she was. Maybe they both were. Or maybe they were just two people stupid enough to believe that $5 and a confession could change anything. 2 hours later, 3 black SUVs rolled through Chicago's South Side toward Ashland Avenue. Malcolm sat in the lead vehicle, Claudia beside him, Leo driving. Behind them, 14 men armed with enough firepower to start a small war. The factory loomed ahead, dark and hollow. Broken windows like missing teeth. Graffiti covering every surface. It looked abandoned. Forgotten. Exactly the kind of place where people disappeared. Claudia's leg bounced with nervous energy. Malcolm noticed and, without thinking, placed his hand on her knee to still it. She looked at him, surprised. He pulled his hand back quickly. "Sorry," Malcolm said. "It's okay." Claudia's voice was soft. "I'm just scared." "Good. Scared keeps you alive." "You scared?" Malcolm considered lying. But looking at her face, at the trust in her eyes, he found he couldn't. "Terrified." "Really?" "Every time." Anyone who says they're not scared going into a fight is either lying or stupid. Usually both. Claudia smiled. It transformed her face, made her look younger. Malcolm felt something warm settle in his chest. He wanted to see that smile again. Wanted to be the reason for it. How many guards? Malcolm asked, forcing himself to focus. For outside, Tommy's voice crackled through the radio. 2 at the main entrance. 2 roaming the perimeter. Inside, I'm reading 8 heat signatures. Could be guards. Could be victims. Can't tell from here. Cameras? 3. I can loop the feeds, but it'll only buy you 5 minutes before someone notices. Do it. Malcolm checked his weapon one more time. Looked at Claudia. Last chance to back out. Not a chance. You're insane. You keep saying that. Because it keeps being true. They moved fast. Leo and 2 others took the guards at the entrance before they could radio for help. Quick, efficient, silent. Malcolm's team swept through the factory like shadows, clearing rooms, neutralizing threats. Claudia stayed close to Malcolm, her breathing quick but controlled. He found himself hyper-aware of her presence, of every step she took, every breath she drew. By the time they reached the main floor, 6 guards were down and nobody had fired a shot. But then Malcolm saw the girls. 17 of them, just like Claudia had said. Chained to pipes in what used to be the factory's main production floor. Some were crying. Some were too broken to cry. The youngest looked maybe 14. The oldest couldn't have been 20. Malcolm felt rage burn through him. Hot and clean and absolute. These weren't just crimes. These were atrocities. Claudia pushed past Malcolm and ran to the nearest girl. Started checking pulses, examining injuries, speaking in a voice so soft Malcolm could barely hear it. The girl looked at Claudia with eyes that had seen too much, and something in her expression changed. Recognition. Hope. It's you, the girl whispered. The nurse from the hospital. I'm getting you out, Claudia said. Her hands were steady now, professional. This was what she was trained for. All of you. Malcolm watched her work. Watched the gentle way she touched each girl, the quiet strength in her voice. Something in his chest cracked open. This woman, who'd killed a man hours ago, who was wanted by the police, who should be running for her life, was instead kneeling in a dirty factory floor treating traumatized girls with more compassion than Malcolm had ever seen. That's when the shooting started. For more guards came through the back entrance, weapons drawn. Malcolm's men returned fire. The factory exploded into chaos. Bullets ricocheted off metal. Glass shattered. Someone screamed. Malcolm grabbed Claudia and shoved her behind a concrete pillar. His body covered hers instinctively, protecting her from the gunfire. For a moment they were pressed together, her heart hammering against his chest, his breath in her hair. She looked up at him and something passed between them. Something more than fear or adrenaline. Stay down. Malcolm said, his voice rough. But she didn't stay down. The moment he moved, she ran to the girls, started unlocking chains with bolt cutters Leo threw her. One after another, freeing them while bullets flew overhead. Malcolm had never seen anything like it. This woman who should be terrified was instead running toward danger. Cover her. Malcolm shouted to his men. They formed a perimeter around Claudia and the girls. Created a wall of bodies between them and the guards. Malcolm fought like he'd never fought before, driven by something more than duty or territory. He was fighting for Claudia. For these girls. For something that felt dangerously close to purpose. One of Malcolm's soldiers took a bullet to the shoulder. Another got grazed across the ribs. But they held the line. Malcolm saw the last guard go down. Saw Leo dragging the injured men toward the exit. Saw Claudia helping the last girl to her feet. And then he saw something that made his blood freeze. Red and blue lights outside the factory. Sirens. Chicago PD was here. Move! Malcolm yelled. Everyone out now. They ran. Malcolm's men carrying injured girls. Claudia supporting the ones who could barely walk. Malcolm stayed at the rear, making sure everyone got out. His eyes never left Claudia's back, tracking her through the chaos, ready to throw himself between her and any threat. Out through the back exit, across the factory yard, toward the waiting SUVs. Claudia counted heads as they went. 17 girls. All accounted for. But as they reached the vehicles, Malcolm heard a voice behind them. Nobody moves. He turned. Detective Captain Morrison stood there, weapon drawn, 5 uniformed officers behind him. Malcolm recognized Morrison from Tommy's research. Foster's captain. The man who'd been covering for the trafficking operation. Malcolm stepped in front of Claudia without thinking. Shielding her with his body. Malcolm Cross, Morrison said. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. Funny. Malcolm didn't lower his weapon. I was about to say the same thing to you. You're harboring a cop killer. You just assaulted police property. That's 20 years minimum. Police property? Claudia's voice cut through the tension. She stepped out from behind Malcolm, ignoring his attempt to keep her protected. Those are children. Human beings. Morrison's eyes flicked to her. Nurse Mitchell. You should have run when you had the chance. She did run, Malcolm said. His voice was cold steel. Straight to me. And now everyone's going to know what you've been doing here. Nobody's going to know anything. Because nobody's leaving this factory alive. Morrison raised his weapon. His officers did the same. But then Malcolm smiled. Tommy? You getting all this? Every word, boss. Tommy's voice came through Malcolm's earpiece, loud enough for everyone to hear. Streaming live to every news station in Chicago. Also sent copies to the FBI, the state attorney general, and 3 very interested journalists. Morrison's face went white. You're bluffing. Am I? Malcolm pulled out his phone, showed him the screen. Tommy had been recording everything. The girls. The chains. Morrison's confession. All of it live-streamed for the world to see. You're finished, Malcolm said quietly. All of you. Every dirty cop, every politician who looked the other way, everyone who profited from this. Finished. Morrison's hand shook on his weapon. For a moment, Malcolm thought he might actually shoot. But then they heard more sirens. Different ones. Federal vehicles. The real cavalry arriving. Morrison lowered his gun. His officers did the same. They knew it was over. FBI agents swarmed the factory. Took Morrison and his men into custody. Secured the scene. And through it all, Claudia stood there with those 17 girls, making sure each one was safe, checked, cared for. An FBI agent approached Malcolm. Mr. Cross, you're going to need to come with us. Answer some questions. I know the drill. This woman too. The agent nodded at Claudia. She's still wanted for questioning. She's also the reason you caught Morrison. Malcolm met the agent's eyes. She tried to report this 3 days ago. Your department ignored her. Foster tried to kill her for it. She defended herself. That's not murder. That's justice. The agent looked at Claudia, at the girls she was still helping, and something in his expression softened. We'll sort it out downtown. As they led Claudia toward a federal vehicle, she looked back at Malcolm. Their eyes met across the chaos. Malcolm felt his chest tighten. He wanted to go to her. Wanted to promise her everything would be okay. But federal agents were watching, and he had his own questions to answer. "I'll see you soon," Malcolm called out. Claudia smiled. That same smile that transformed her face. "You better." 6 hours later, Malcolm sat in an FBI interrogation room, telling his story for the third time. They'd separated him from Claudia immediately. Standard procedure. But through the wall, he could hear her voice, calm and steady, explaining everything. He focused on that sound, let it ground him through the endless questions. Finally, a senior agent entered Malcolm's room. Sat down across from him. "You're free to go." Malcolm raised an eyebrow. "That's it?" Nurse Mitchell's statement corroborates everything. The footage your tech guy provided sealed it. We've arrested 12 officers, including Morrison. 3 city councilmen are in custody. The state's attorney is opening a full investigation. You did good work tonight, Mr. Cross. I broke about 15 laws doing it. Yes. You did. The agent smiled slightly. But sometimes the law needs a little help. Go home. Stay out of trouble. And maybe consider going legitimate. Maybe. Malcolm walked out of the FBI building just as the sun was rising over Chicago. Claudia sat on the steps outside, still wearing the borrowed clothes, looking exhausted and relieved and broken all at once. When she saw him, her face lit up. Malcolm sat down beside her. Closer than he needed to. Close enough that their shoulders touched. "They're letting you go?" Malcolm asked. "Self-defense. Clean shoot. I'm clear." She looked up at him. "Those girls. The FBI says they're going to reunite them with their families. Get them help. Counseling. Whatever they need. That's good. It's because of you. It's because of $5. Malcolm pulled the crumpled bill from his pocket. Held it up to the light. "You walked up to a Korean mob boss and offered him lunch money to hide you. That's either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever seen. Why not both?" Malcolm laughed. Actually laughed. "What are you going to do now?" "I don't know. I can't go back to my hospital. Can't go back to my apartment. Pretty sure I'm unemployed and homeless. I might have a solution to that." Claudia looked at him suspiciously. "I'm not working for the mob. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to run a clinic." Malcolm turned to face her fully. "In my neighborhood. Free healthcare for people who can't afford it. No insurance required. No questions asked. I'll fund it. You run it." "Why would you do that?" "Because Mrs. Hernandez says I protect people. Might as well make it official." Malcolm paused. "And because I want you to stay." Claudia stared at him. "Stay? In Chicago? In the neighborhood?" Malcolm's voice got quieter. "Near me." Something shifted in Claudia's expression. Surprise. Understanding. Hope. "Malcolm Cross, are you asking me out?" "I'm asking you to not disappear. Everything else, we can figure out later." Claudia smiled. That same smile Malcolm was already addicted to. "I think I can manage that." They sat there on the FBI steps, watching the sun rise over Chicago. A Korean mob boss and a nurse who killed a detective. 2 people who should never have crossed paths. 2 people who probably just saved each other's lives. "Malcolm?" Claudia said quietly. "Yeah. Thank you for hiding me. Thank you for that $5. Best investment I ever made." She reached out, took his hand. Malcolm felt electricity shoot through him at the touch. Her fingers were warm against his, strong and sure. What happens now? Claudia asked. Now we go get breakfast. Then we find you a place to stay. Then we start planning that clinic. Malcolm squeezed her hand. Then we see what happens. That simple? That complicated? Malcolm smiled. But I think we can handle it. 3 months later, the Cross Community Clinic opened on 43rd Street, right next to Mrs. Hernandez's bodega. Free healthcare for anyone who walked through the door. Claudia ran it with the same fierce determination she'd shown that night in the rain. Malcolm still ran his operations. Still collected his debts. Still made problems disappear. But now, when people saw him on the street, they didn't just cross to the other side. Sometimes they nodded. Sometimes they thanked him. Sometimes they brought their sick kids to Claudia and trusted that she'd make them better. And every evening, when Claudia closed the clinic, Malcolm was there waiting. Sometimes they'd have dinner at his restaurant. Sometimes they'd walk through the neighborhood, checking on people. Sometimes they'd just sit in his office and talk about nothing and everything. 6 months after that night in the rain, Malcolm kissed Claudia for the first time. They were in the clinic after hours. She was organizing supplies. He was supposed to be doing paperwork but kept getting distracted watching her work. She caught him staring and laughed. See something interesting? She asked. Always, Malcolm said. She walked over to him. Stood close enough that he could smell her perfume, something light and floral. You know, for a crime boss, you're terrible at being subtle. Never claimed to be subtle. Good. Claudia smiled. Because neither am I. She kissed him first. Soft and tentative, like a question. Malcolm answered by pulling her closer, deepening the kiss, pouring 6 months of wanting into that moment. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Claudia laughed. About time, she said. You could have kissed me sooner. You could have asked. Malcolm grinned. I'm asking now. Claudia Mitchell, will you let me take you on an actual date? Dinner, wine, the whole thing? Only if you promise not to start any wars during dessert. I'll try to restrain myself. 1 year after that night in the rain, Malcolm and Claudia moved in together. A nice apartment overlooking the south side. Close enough to the clinic that Claudia could walk to work. Close enough to Malcolm's restaurant that he could check on business. Far enough from both that they had privacy. They built a life together. Complicated and messy and perfect. Claudia ran her clinic. Malcolm ran his operations. And together, they protected the neighborhood in ways neither of them could have managed alone. Mrs. Hernandez started calling them the power couple. Leo made jokes about Malcolm going soft. Tommy said he'd never seen his boss smile so much. But Malcolm didn't care. He'd spent 12 years building an empire based on fear and respect. Claudia had walked into his life with $5 and a confession and shown him something better. Something worth protecting. 2 years after that night in the rain, Malcolm proposed. Not with flowers or fancy restaurants. They were in the clinic, Claudia stitching up one of his men who'd gotten hurt in a fight. Malcolm watched her work, steady and sure, and realized he couldn't imagine his life without her. Marry me, he said. Claudia looked up from her suturing. What? Marry me. Be my wife. Let me spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret walking up to me in that loading dock. Malcolm, I'm literally elbow deep in your enforcer's gunshot wound right now. I know. Marry me anyway. Claudia laughed. Put down her tools. Pulled off her gloves. Walked over to Malcolm and kissed him hard. Yes. Obviously yes. They got married 3 months later. Small ceremony. Just Leo, Tommy, a few trusted men from Malcolm's crew, the girls they'd saved from the factory who'd stayed in touch, and Mrs. Hernandez who cried through the whole thing. No fancy venue. Just Malcolm's restaurant, closed for the night, decorated with lights and flowers. When Malcolm kissed his bride, the whole room cheered. Claudia laughed against his lips. "We did it." "We did," Malcolm agreed. "Best $5 I ever spent." Every year on their anniversary, Claudia left an envelope at Malcolm's office. Inside was always the same thing. A $5 bill and a note that read, "For the next person who needs hiding." Malcolm kept every single one. Because that's the thing about $5 and a confession. It doesn't matter how dangerous you are or how scared you should be. Sometimes all it takes is $5, the courage to ask for help, and someone willing to say yes. Sometimes that's exactly what changes everything. Sometimes that's exactly what saves you. Sometimes that's exactly what love looks like. Malcolm Cross had been running Chicago's South Side for 12 years before Claudia Mitchell walked into his life. He thought he knew what power was. What respect meant. What mattered. She taught him different. Taught him that real strength wasn't about fear or territory. It was about protecting the people who couldn't protect themselves. It was about standing up when everyone else sat down. It was about loving someone enough to risk everything. And on quiet nights, when Claudia fell asleep in his arms, when the clinic was closed and the restaurant was locked up and the neighborhood was safe, Malcolm would pull out that first $5 bill. The one she'd offered him in the rain. The one that changed everything. He'd look at it and remember. Remember the woman who'd walked up to the most dangerous man she knew and asked for help. Remember the choice he'd made to say yes. Remember everything that came after. $5. A confession. A choice. Sometimes that's all it takes to save the world. Or at least one small corner of it. Sometimes that's all it takes to find the person you were always meant to meet. Sometimes that's all it takes to discover that the most dangerous thing in the world isn't a gun or a knife or a crime boss. It's hope. And love. And two people stupid enough to believe in both. Malcolm Cross believed. And Claudia Mitchell made him glad he did. Every single day. If this story touched you, hit that like button. Comment below and tell me what you think. Subscribe because we have more stories coming that will challenge everything you think you know about love, power, and the choices people make when they're desperate. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.